Hey, good morning, everybody. How we doing today? Good, good. It is good to see you. I'm gonna go ahead and do this. Can you guys hit the crowd lights a little bit so I can see eyeballs a little bit? Yeah. I like to see faces, but we are glad that you are here. Before I get to my message, I got a couple things I want to also bring to your attention. The first one is back in Christmas time, December, we had our Christmas offering. We invited you to give to that, and we had a goal, as you see there, of $30,000. Just a quick reminder, $15,000 of that was going to our Generosity Feeds event, which is taking place in March. And so if you're brand new, like, I don't know what that means. Don't worry, information is going to come out in the next month or so we'll tell you more details about that. But a portion of that was going to our Generosity Feeds event. Everything above that was going to a future fund. I don't have time to explain that. No, we're not building a new building right now, but we're just trying to fix a few things around here and get us ready for the future. And so everything else over and beyond $30,000 or above $15,000 is going to that future fund. And you guys did a pretty good job. We finished at $47,000. Yeah. We appreciate the 67 cents someone gave. That means, and yes, I could do a 6-7 joke here, but I won't because most of you have heard those way too much, right? But thanks for your generosity. Like I said last week, we'll get more details out about where we finished financially for the year, and we'll be getting our budget out to you for 2026 too. The other thing I want to invite you to do is that if you have a phone, you can go and actually through our email this past week, we have an all-church survey that we do every single January. Just gives us an opportunity to know a little bit more about you. We love to figure out our demographics. Who are we? Where are you from? Where are you involved here at the Journey? How are you involved at the Journey? And a little bit of feedback about this past year, 2025. So we'd like for you to take the time to do that. You can do it through the QR code that's in front of you too. If you don't have our app or you didn't get the email, takes about 5 minutes tops, but we love that, and we're going to use that data throughout the year, and it kind of helps us think through, again, who we are as a church. So make sure you do that, all right? Talking about apps and QR codes, we live in a digital age, don't we? We take this thing everywhere we go, and it does basically anything that we could want it to do. But about 15 years ago, they did something pretty incredible. They put a GPS chip in our phones, which means we're never lost, are we? Like what we do is we don't even know how to get anywhere anymore on our own. We just put in an address or a location or a destination on our phone and we hit go. And some voice, for me, it's an Aussie lady, speaks to me and tells me exactly where to go. And finally, she's like, turn left into the car park. It took me a little while to figure out that was a parking lot. But this is what we use, right? And so if we actually try to go somewhere that we don't know where we're going and we end up and we're lost, we're not really lost. We just pull out the phone and say, all right, Chipotle, and hit directions. And it gives us directions to the local Chipotle, so we're not lost anymore. But back in the day, some of you remember this thing. The Rand McNally map. Old Rand must be a billionaire because there's like so many of these. But if you remember back in these days, when you were going somewhere, you didn't put an address into a phone and it would tell you exactly where to go. You had to figure it out yourself, right? Like it was a process. And so you'd open up your map and you're like, all right, we're going from Ohio. I opened up Ohio again. Did it the first service. But everybody's trying to get out of Ohio, right? So you're in Ohio. And you're going to vacation down, I know some of you are from Ohio, and you're trying to get down to Florida, you'd go to wherever you were located here in Ohio, you'd find your place, Toledo. All right, great. Now I've got to write down my path from Toledo all the way down to Florida. And so what I'd have to do is then I'd have to go to the next state, and I'd have to figure out, see if I can remember what the state was next, and find that, and then walk through that state. And this is how we used to get from point A to point B. What if you were lost? You can pull out your GPS and say, hey, find the next Chipotle so I can get there, right? You had to open up your map again and say, well, I think I'm about 5 to 10 miles within this vicinity right here. And somehow you'd have to look at the very tiny little lines and roads and see if that's the road you're on. Try to come up with a plan so that you could find your way back to where you were going. I'm so glad that we don't have to use this anymore and we can use our GPS. Because when you're lost, it's not a whole lot of fun when you got to figure life out yourself. In fact, when it comes to faith, some of us get through life because we have an ultimate GPS, right? We are followers of Jesus. And no matter what we're going through in our life, and sometimes it's really hard stuff. Our lives aren't perfect. But when we follow Jesus, like there is this guide that is there, this GPS for us that really makes sure that we go through life not being lost. And yet, still, for others in their faith, it's like they're still working through the Rand McNally map. The life hits, and they're not sure where they are, right? Life is hard. Life is tough. Things are going on that they're not sure where to go. They don't have any guidance. They don't have any direction. And they try to figure out life on their own. They try to figure out their way out of whatever they're going through on their own. And so there's no GPS there like Jesus to lead them, to give them direction, and they're always lost. This morning, we're going to talk about that, helping those who are lost find their way. As we continue this series called DNA, Who Are We? We are talking about our values. But last week, as we started the series, I just kind of began with there's some questions we kind of think through, right? The what's, the how's, and the why of something like church. Because for many people, we're stuck on the what's and how's. The what's are what takes place here on a Sunday morning. It's classes for Journey Kids. It's a teen ministry that's happening, who, by the way, have their beginning night tonight, their big open house type things. If you've got middle school, high school kids, send them here tonight. They're going to have a great time. But those are the what's. The how's are how do we get more kids to come on Sunday night? How do we get more volunteers? How do we plan the things that we're doing? And oftentimes in the church world, that's the thing we mostly focus on. And we forget the why. And that's the most important thing. Now, the what's and how's are important too, but the why is the most important. Why do we exist? Why is the church here? Well, the church is here because of Jesus. And we want to see more and more people know and follow him. And because of this, one of our core values as a church is for the one. For the one. What does that mean? Well, we actually get this from a story that Jesus tells in Luke chapter 15. Jesus is talking and he's sharing the story about a shepherd. The shepherd has 100 sheep. And then one day he calls the sheep together and he notices that one of those sheep are gone. Now, that may sound a little weird to us, but shepherds knew their sheep, right? They knew their job was to protect them and to care for them. But more than that, they knew the personality. They knew each sheep. And so if all their sheep showed up, even if they had 100 and one of them was missing, they knew that sheep was missing and they knew exactly what sheep was not there. And so these shepherds would risk everything. They would risk their lives to go find this lost sheep. And so in the story, the shepherd leaves the 99, right, to go find the one. Now, let me just kind of throw this out there. As a church, if you're a follower of Jesus, we would say, hey, you're part of the 99, okay? So if you ever hear us use that terminology, this is where this comes from. But he leaves the 99 to go find the one. And so when we say we are for the one, we believe this church doesn't exist just for Christians. We believe that this church exists like the shepherd to go out and reach the one. Now, you might be asking yourself, who is the one? I've said it this way before. Your one is someone who is far from God but close to you. All right, let me say that one more time. Your one is someone who is far from God but close to you. That there's someone in your life that you know, that you love, that you care about who is far from Jesus. And it may be a family friend. It may be your best friend. It may be a family member. It could be your coworker. It could be a neighbor. But it's someone who is far from God but close to you, which means they're lost. And if we're a follower of Jesus, our goal, our role in life is to make sure we are helping them be found, to help them know and follow Jesus. Well, what does this look like? I mean, how do we interact? Well, there's a great story in the book of Matthew that I want to walk through. And last week, we talked a little bit in the book of Matthew about how Jesus chooses his first four disciples. Well, we're going to look at Matthew chapter 9. And Matthew's actually telling the story of how he was chosen to follow Jesus. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 9, starting with verse 9. Here's what we read. Matthew writes, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. Follow me and be my disciple, Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. We meet Matthew in the town of Capernaum. We got a map here we're going to put up on the screen. You can see the Sea of Galilee. Sea of Galilee was actually, to put it in context, about the same size as Washington, D.C. Capernaum's there on the northwestern coast of the Sea of Galilee. You see the Jordan River that's coming through here. Now, people would travel, business people, travelers would come through the Jordan River, or they would come through Capernaum. It was a kind of a traveling spot that you would stop. It was on a major route of trade. And so it was a pretty hopping place in some ways. But these travelers would come through and they would have goods because they're coming out of a different region. They'd have to pay taxes on these goods. Or if you were a fisherman and you were fishing the Sea of Galilee, or you were moving stuff from one place to another, even come down the Jordan River on boats, you had to stop by in Capernaum to pay taxes on this, okay? So Matthew's not an IRS agent. That's kind of what we think when we see tax collector. He's actually working at a customs booth, right? And so his job is to collect these taxes from people as they're traveling through this town of Capernaum. One day, Jesus shows up. He's traveling down the coast here of the Sea of Galilee. He stops there in Capernaum. He sees Matthew. And like last week, he goes to Matthew. He says, hey, Matthew, come and follow me. And just like last week, Matthew does exactly what those other four guys did in Matthew, I think, chapter 2. He leaves everything, stops his job, stops the work that he's known maybe for years, and he goes and he follows Jesus. Verse 10. Later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. Now, we don't know how much time expands here. Some say it's the same day. Some say maybe a couple of days later. But whatever the case, Matthew actually invites Jesus to come to his house to have dinner. But here's the cool part. Matthew invites other people there. We see who they are, right? He invites colleagues. Some of them are tax collectors. They work in the same industry, the same field as Matthew. And then he also says there's another group there, some disreputable sinners. I love this because Matthew is writing this about his own friends and acquaintances, right? He's like, yeah, I got some pretty rowdy friends that I hang out with. Well, what happens here at this dinner party? Look at verse 11. But when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? Think about that. That's kind of a strange and really a harsh question. So to understand it, we need to know a little bit more about the religious and social norms in that day. Jesus carried the title of rabbi. He was known as a teacher. And so if you were known as a rabbi, there was expectations for how you lived your life. There were norms and certain things that you did and didn't do if you had this role. Jesus is sitting and eating with Matthew and this group of people that Matthew has invited to his home. And it went against all the expectations and the norms in that day. That's why these Pharisees call them scum. I looked it up in the Greek. The Greek word for scum is scum, okay? Which means this is a pretty harsh word that these Pharisees are using. But why do they use this term? Scum didn't follow the traditional Jewish religious rituals and observances and laws like tithing and purity. Plus, this particular group worked really close with the Roman government. And so for the Jewish people, if you were Jewish and you were working with the Roman government, you were a traitor. And so they looked at them as traitors to their own people. And then who you ate with showed your social standing, showed the circles of people that you were a part of. And so with all of this kind of in the background of these Pharisees' minds, they're appalled at who Jesus is eating with. They couldn't understand why he was doing this because for them it was all about following rules. And it really wasn't about loving people. They viewed people far from God way less than them. If you follow Jesus, how do you view people that are far from him? Because I'll be honest, sometimes we may say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus, but our behavior and our actions and our words kind of don't reflect our beliefs, right? Nor do they reflect the heart of God. And so maybe we categorize people. Here's some potential categories we have for people who may be far from Jesus. Maybe people that are far from Jesus, we treat with indifference. Like we show up on a Sunday morning, I'm here, I kind of jump into a group and maybe serve a little bit, I tithe, the music's really good, the messages are okay, people seem to kind of have things in order, it seems like everybody's unified, no big issues. But you know what? I'm really busy. I'm a really busy person, really important, I got a lot of stuff going on. And I'm looking around and it looks like there's enough people here who can take care of this. I know I'm a follower of Jesus and this is something I should do, but at the same time, I really don't have time for this. And these people here look like they've got it covered. And so we kind of shrug our shoulders and have this attitude of indifference when it comes to people who are far from Jesus. Or maybe we isolate ourselves from those people who are far from Jesus. In fact, for us, Christian is an adjective for our lives. We send our kids to Christian schools. They play in Christian sports leagues. We read Christian books. We listen to Christian music. We watch Christian news. We get our coffee from Jehovah Jova, right? And the people who go to Starbucks are pagans and sinners, and we don't want to be around them. Some of us do. We put up these barriers. We put up these walls, and it's only because one thing is fear. Like we have this fear that if we're around people who believe differently than me and act differently than me and talk differently than me, then I'm going to become just like them or my family's going to become like that. And some of you are like, well, hold up a second, Chad. Like that's kind of the way we live our life. I'm not knocking that. What I'm saying is it's very easy to isolate ourselves. Like I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but if we're not careful, we're going to isolate ourselves so much from people that are far from Jesus. We're going to build these huge walls that are never going to be able to be penetrated because we live in this fear. And when we live in that fear, it's hard to reach people who are far from Jesus. So we isolate ourselves. But then lastly, and I think this is probably the one that fits the Pharisees really well, we antagonize those who are far from Jesus. Some of you here may think about people who are far from Jesus a lot. And when I say that, I mean like an unhealthy a lot, okay? Like that's where your mind is. If people think differently than you, believe differently than you, act differently than you, work differently than you, say things differently than you, vote differently than you, what do? You antagonize them. We love to do that with our weapon of choice, social media. And so we'll post stuff online, or worse yet, we'll respond to what someone else has written with our own views and ideas to antagonize them. And I don't know what it is. There's like this weird human thing that we think if we antagonize somebody enough, like it's going to change their mind. And they're going to be like, well, you've been right the whole time, and I'm going to do exactly and be like you. That's not the way this works, all right? That tends to send people further and further away from Jesus. And so we live this life where we maybe view people who are far from Jesus by antagonizing them because they're so different than we are. There are many other things I know that we can add here, and you probably know the way that you view people. But when it comes to what this story is talking about, the Pharisees were worried about people not following the rules and living differently than they were and doing everything they could to make them mad. And what were they missing out on? They're missing out on loving people unconditionally, just like Jesus. That is why Jesus is eating at that table with the people that Matthew has invited to eat with him. And so these Pharisees say, why is Jesus eating with these scum? Now, I think they said this loud enough for Jesus to hear because he gives a response in verse 12. When Jesus heard this, he said, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. My guess is over the last 4 to 6 weeks, many of you have been sick, okay? Everybody's got something right now, whether it's the flu, the super XL flu, the new strand of COVID, colds, fevers. I mean, it feels like everybody is sick. And when you're sick, you go to the doctor. You don't go to the doctor because you're like, I just want to go visit my doctor and see how they're doing today, do we? No, we go to the doctor because we are sick. We don't go to the doctor when we're doing well and when we are healthy. Here in this part of the story or this event, Jesus says that he was sent by God to do what? To heal the sick. But his response isn't about a physical health. He's actually making a spiritual statement. And that really is directed at those Pharisees, to their attitude, to their actions of the Pharisees. He's like, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. That I am here with people who need me. These people are lost. They don't know me, and I want them to know and follow me. That's why I'm here. And then he says this in verse 13. Then he added, now go and learn the meaning of the scripture. I want you to show mercy, not offer sacrifices. For I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. I kind of like this because it feels like Jesus is saying the people I'm sitting with right now and I'm eating with know they're sinners, right? They're disreputable sinners. They know exactly who they are. They need a GPS in their life to give them direction, to give them guidance because they are lost. Again, I want to help them know and follow me. And so when Jesus makes the statement, I want you to show mercy, not offer sacrifices, he's saying your spiritual life, right? It's not about rituals. It's not about religious observances. It's not about religious systems or structures. It's about mercy. And the mercy Jesus talks about isn't about building walls and barriers. This mercy, it's about compassion and unconditional love and kindness. Jesus says, that's why I am here. And that's why I want people to know and follow me, not to build up these rules and systems that people get lost in, but because of who I am. I am here for the one. And that is why this church exists, that we see one of our values as for the one. That we want to see more and more people take their next steps towards, which we think is the ultimate GPS in their life, to follow and know Jesus. That we are called as a church to reach those who are far from Jesus, but close to us. And so as you kind of think about that in your mind, here's a question for you. Who's your one? Who is that person in your life that's close to you, but maybe far from Jesus? That person who needs to know and follow Jesus. You probably know, if you're a follower of Christ, who that person is. But let me share a couple things about this as you're thinking about your one. You know what they're attracted to? They're attracted to you. They're attracted to a relationship, not some church structure. And maybe sometimes we think, hey, if I bring this person to church, the church will take care of it. That's not how this works, right? Your role, if you're a follower of Christ, is to have a relationship with people that are outside of the faith so that you can help them know and follow Jesus. And it doesn't mean that you're just picking up random people on the side of the road and like, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. Most of the time, it's the people you have a relationship with already. Again, that you love and you care for, that are important to you, who are just far from Jesus. They want to know you. They want to know the real, honest, authentic you. And that could be the starting point to this incredible relationship that they have with Jesus. They're attracted to their relationship, not some sort of structure. But the other thing, and it kind of piggybacks on this, your one desires to be unconditionally loved and not seen as some project, okay? We got a lot of project managers here at The Journey. That's basically all you do day in and day out. And sometimes that makes its way into our spiritual life. And so as we think about something like this, like, okay, here's a project. This person is a project. I'm going to have this to-do list. I'm going to work through this. I mean, maybe if you want to do that, that's fine. Just don't let anybody know that. Just kind of put that to the side. But they're not a project. Like, people are people, and we're supposed to love unconditionally those people who are like us and those people who are different than us. People that we know, that we care about, who we know need to know and follow Jesus. They just want to be loved unconditionally. And they're messy, just like you are. And they got problems and they struggle. But the difference is you got that ultimate GPS, right? You got Jesus in your life that is so different than someone who is far from him. And so love them unconditionally. And then the last thing is, and I think we see this with Matthew, your one matters to God, and so they should matter to you. Why does Matthew invite these people to come to his home to eat? It's not just because he's like throwing some dinner party just for the heck of it. Jesus did something in his life. Jesus changed him and transformed him in such a way that he wants his buddies, his ones in his life to know and follow Jesus too. And so he invites them because he knows, hey, these people matter to God and so they matter to me. And I want them to be changed and transformed just like me. And so our ones matter to God and so they should matter to us. Again, there's other things we could say here, but we believe as a church we exist to reach the ones in our life. And I know some of you are cynical, and you think this is like some marketing scheme so we can have more people show up on a Sunday morning, right? You're like, all right, we're like 600 people on a Sunday morning, and then by the end of the year, we'll have 1,200 people because we all invite our ones. It's not a marketing scheme. This is biblical. This comes out of Scripture. Jesus says, go and make disciples. Jesus says, you will be my witnesses. Like, this is what we are called to do if we are followers of Jesus. This isn't about increasing church attendance here at the Journey, okay? But I do want you to know this. The what and hows of the things we do here at this church, we are always thinking about the one. In fact, internally, we talk about the one filter. And so what we do on a Sunday morning is we are always thinking about a one. If you were to invite your one to church, if I'm going to invite my one to church, what are they going to experience? Are they going to know they matter? Are they going to encounter Jesus? Is Chad going to get up on stage and use all these big words that nobody in the church world knows, but everybody acts like they do? Is he going to use these big words? Or if he's going to use them, is he actually going to explain them so they understand, right? We think through that, through the events we have, through classes we have, through community service we do. How does this interact and affect and help us reach the ones in our life? Again, this is not about increasing church attendance. This is about living out the mission that Jesus has given us. And so we do hope that if your one lives close by, that you do invite them here because we're thinking about them. We want them to encounter and experience Jesus. We want them to know and follow Jesus. And oh, by the way, if you're like, yeah, I'm not sure they'd come if I invited them. Lifeway did some research, and it shows that 80% of non-churchgoers, this would be our ones, would go if invited. 80%, 8 out of every 10. If you can handle being rejected twice out of 10 people, like, is it worth inviting someone? I would say yes, it is. Because here at the Journey, we're always thinking about your ones too. But there's another piece that's way more important, okay? And I want to actually go back to the story Jesus teaches in Luke chapter 15. Look at verse 7. He says, in the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. Like when our ones encounter Jesus, they are changed and transformed like many of us. There was someone in our life that invested in us and influenced us. We came to know and follow Jesus because we were changed and transformed too. And like that story, when that one is found and they decide to follow Jesus, what does Jesus say here? There's a celebration in heaven. A huge celebration. And of course, there's one here on earth too. And this is why we are for the one. We want to see our ones experience the life-changing transformation of Jesus, celebration that takes place when people follow Jesus. And so if you're here this morning and you're a follower of Jesus, and maybe you're here this morning like, I'm not a follower of Jesus, I'm trying to figure out this Jesus thing. It feels very insider focused. Let me just talk to you for a second, okay? What we're talking about over these next few weeks are values of us as a church, but we believe there are also values that we should have if we're a follower of Christ. So if you're like, I'm not sure about this Jesus thing and following Jesus, if you can hold on for these next 4 weeks and just be a part of this, you're going to actually understand what it looks like to follow Jesus. And maybe that'll help you make some decisions in your own life. But yeah, we're doing a lot of focus on those of us who are followers of Jesus. But let me say, if you're a follower of Jesus, we get to choose. We can be like the Pharisees. And that's going to cause more harm than good. And I can tell you, being in full-time ministry for 26 years now, 27 years, we got enough Pharisees that are out there, all right? We don't need to add a few more to that. So you can choose to be like the Pharisees, or you can choose to be like Matthew. Matthew knew who his ones were. And what does he want to do? He wants to introduce them to the life-changing love and the transformation that takes place through knowing and following Jesus, right? This ultimate GPS for people he knew who were lost. And I think that's the choice that if we're a follower of Christ, that we are called to do. So with that kind of in mind, I'm going to invite you to do something very, very tangible. You can take out your phone right now. And if you have our app, you can open up the app. If you don't, there's a QR code in front of you. You can scan that. But on our app, on the very first button there, it says, who is your one? Who is your one? On that QR code, there's a link tree. You'll find who is your one there. We want you to share with us who your one is, okay? Some of you did that last year, and you remember doing that. And I want you to know we've been praying, staff and leaders for year ones. But even if you did that, we want you actually to do this again because we're doing something a little bit different. Let me kind of share that with you. First, our staff and prayer team are going to continue to pray for who your one is. The second thing is, over the course of this year, we're going to send out some encouraging words, some ideas, some thoughts on reaching your one. And so I'm going to be spearheading this, and I'll be hitting you up. And it's like, hey, here's something to think about. Hey, keep up the good work. And so we just want to be able to have that conversation with you and keep that going throughout this year and know you're supported in this. The other thing is we want you to share your updates. Over the year, as you've shared your one and you're interacting and things are going on there, let us know. But here's a really big one for us. We want you to let us know when you invite your one to this church, okay? Here's why. First, it reminds us of the why of why we do what we do here, but we want to be praying for you because we know it's a huge step to say, hey, will you come and go to church with me this Sunday? And if they say yes, we know you're going to get nervous, maybe get a little bit sweaty, and you're going to wonder what's going to happen here. Well, I want to remind you, we're already thinking about your one, but we want to know when you're inviting them here so we can be just praying specifically for that person that they will encounter Jesus here because they've already got that relationship with you. They've already encountered Jesus in some way, but they can experience Jesus even more here and will end up knowing and following him. So take the time to fill out that form and let us know, and let's just see what God does with that over this new year. I want to let you know this isn't theoretical, by the way, okay? Again, it's not some marketing scheme to get more people here. This is real, and we believe so strongly in this that I want to share a story with you that happened over the past couple of years. Some of you here, if you've had kids down in the pre-K and kindergarten class, or if you've been a part of the Franconia neighborhood group, you probably know Miss Jeannie. Miss Jeannie is just a great person. She's an incredible teacher, amazing lady. She sends me text messages throughout the year, and it's like she just knows that I need it, and she's just so encouraging, and they always hit me at the right moment. This past week, we were kind of talking about a story that came to reality in the fall, but she was sharing with me how her granddaughter, Skylar, started dating a guy named Mike, and Jeannie's blunt. She's like, I had concerns, and mostly because Mike wasn't a Christian. Mike didn't want anything to do with church. Didn't want to talk about Jesus. Didn't want to talk about faith. He just had never actually been to church. She said, I don't think his parents ever took him to church. So he had never experienced anything related to church and had some bad experience with people who said they were Christians and trying to really push Jesus on him. So it turned him off for Jesus and the church. But even in that, she's like, hey, but we loved him because, he was dating our granddaughter, and we care about people because of this faith that we have. Well, over time, she said that Mike went to Woody, Jeannie's husband, Skylar's grandfather, dad's out of the picture, and went to Woody and said, hey, I want to ask if I could marry Skylar. Can I get your permission to marry her? Jeannie said that was still kind of tough for her because Mike wasn't a Christian, but she said, I still trusted that God was at work. And again, they let Mike know, like, hey, Mike, we're a Christian family. Like, we pray together. We go to church together. We live this out. This is who we are. Well, again, she just continued to pray, hey, God, work in this. Do something pretty amazing here. And Jeannie said Mike's always been curious. And so over time, he started to ask questions. And then one Sunday, he shows up here at church for his very first church experience in his life. And after that, she said, he came to me and said, I want to read the Bible. And so Jeannie said, here's some places I would start. And she said every day Mike was reading the Bible and asking her questions. And on her own, she's praying that this is going to change Mike and his life. And then she said one night last year, they were at their family dinner, and Mike leaned over to Jeannie. They call her Amma, or Amma. And he said to her, Amma, I have a question for you. Jeannie said this week, she's like, when he said that internally, she's like, oh no, what's wrong, right? Because that's kind of where our minds go. But here was this question. I'm wondering if you would baptize me. Last fall, I think in September, this took place. There's Miss Jeannie. And that is Mike. Jeannie told me this week, she said, Chad, I wish it was a better story. I wish there was just something amazing, like this lightning bolt moment. And I said, those happen so rarely. What happened with you and Mike is the way that it really works, right? It's because we build relationships with people. And it's not because there's some project, not because we're trying to do something weird. It's because we believe that there's a GPS that we're supposed to follow. And that GPS is Jesus, that we're to know and follow Jesus. And because when we know and follow Jesus, it changes us. It transforms us. It makes us different. And we get to live this life of freedom because of following him. And so if you follow Jesus, your mission is to help your one know and follow Jesus. Yes, we do this in the context of the church. And yes, we build relationships with each other. And yes, we're a part of the 99 if we follow Christ. That is who we are. But we are called to be on mission with Jesus to help more and more people know and follow him. We want to have more stories like Mike in this place and in this world. Who's your Mike? Who's your one? And as we go through this new year, I ask you to ask God to lead and guide you and direct you as you help your one find Jesus.